Well, I am excited today to be joined by my friend Reece Register of CXO Worx, and well, welcome everybody to another edition of Fireside Chat. So, Reece, it's great. It's great to have you, man. Thanks for making the time for this conversation.
Yeah, Ben, I appreciate the invite, man. Always good catching up with you.
I love it. I love it. So, Reese, you and I have crossed paths at different points in the industry over the years, and I think there's probably a lot of people that know you from your time at Rent Scale, and now you're out doing your own thing. So, I'd imagine there's a lot of people who are still like, "What's this CXO Works thing?
Yeah.
Tell me what." So, maybe that's a good place to start. Maybe kick us off. Well, tell us about CXO Works and why you decided to go start this new venture.
Yeah, so I guess it kind of goes back in 2018. I came from the retail world and magically got this role as a BDM in property management. No experience in technically sales, no experience in real estate, period. Still to this day, I don't know why the guy hired me, but it worked out. And when I got that role, the first year was kind of figuring things out, right? Figuring out the industry, figuring out what property management needs were. And then we started to elevate. And I can remember being in a level 10 meeting one day, and we were kind of struggling to find our way as far as growth. And everybody kept talking about service. And I said, stop. We should stop worrying about service. We need to start using the word experience.
Mm,
And that day shifted my whole mindset around how every business ran. And for the next 4 years of that company, we focused solely on customer experience, whether that was client or owner. Um, and the outcome was we became the highest ranked property management company in the entire state of Florida because we were so focused on it. And then that end result, obviously being a Google review. So it was very attractive. So it actually sold in 2022. And I did go over to the rent scale side for a couple of years because I was a client of theirs at Rent It Network when I was running that
yeah.
company. I was like, man, that was a great experience. I want to go help other companies across the country do the exact same thing. But
Yeah.
what happened is I kept finding myself gravitating back to not just the sales component, but really focusing on how to create a better experience throughout the entire customer journey. So this year, I turned 36 and I said, you know what, it's time to roll the dice so that 10 years from now, I don't say I wish I would have. And I have just dropped the hammer and went all in versus doing it on the side or for,
Yeah.
companies helping out to really design and craft customer experiences that transcend all industries and are really focused on being customer advocates as the lever for growth. And it's just been a fun and exciting ride. I've made a lot of great people, been able to help a lot of companies already, and it's doing nothing but almost changing the way people look and feel at businesses. It's what is my emotional connection versus
Mm.
what is the service that they're providing. So it's highly rewarding, a lot of fun. Nothing is traditional in what we do. So I am
Yeah.
having a great time with it.
I love it, man. Well, you and I talked about this before, but there must be something about turning 36 because same thing. Like, all right, I'm 36. Like, no, it's time to go do this. So, kudos to you, man. I mean, I know it better than most. Like making that jump, saying, hey, I'm going all in on this. Rather than trying to do it on the side or something like that. So it's a big leap, and that's awesome, man. One of the things you said that really jumped out to me, and I imagined is you think about this differently than most people. Like I hear all the time from people, like they want to. I need to get my Google reviews up. I need more Google reviews. I need more 5-star reviews, and that's valid, right? Because in the world that we're in, a lot of people who are looking for management companies, the first place they go is to Google, and it's part of their research. But it sounds to me like, based on what you're saying, like that's almost the wrong question to be asking. How do I get more Google reviews, or how do I get more 5-star reviews? Maybe you could talk a little bit how you kind of approach that versus the traditional, like what I would say is like the tactical of like, oh, you need to send out a link to all your owners and you need to put it in your email signature, right? Like that. It sounds like you're thinking about it from the opposite end.
Yeah. I look at the Google reviews the finish line. That's
Yeah.
really what I look at with it. And there's all types of different elements, like what BrightReach is doing. You're focusing on that sales piece of the customer journey. Is how
Yeah.
do we deliver during that segment just an incredible 5-star experience that we earn versus ask for. So what we do at CXO Works is we take the entire customer journey, all of those different elements from awareness, consideration, purchase, service, all the way down to loyalty, and we look at it from this totally different lens of how does a customer feel during every single interaction of this. And the best example that I always give with this is Disney's Avatar ride at
Mm.
Disney World here in Orlando, Florida. Number one, they had this huge movie that went behind it. Now a three part movie.
Yeah.
It was just super immersive. So then they created a ride, and people wait hours to get on this ride, right? So they're in line deciding if they're going to use the business. Before they even got there, they invested all their time and money for tickets and everything. So they're moving forward, but the entire line of Avatar is its own experience in itself. So you're not even
Mm.
doing anything. You're just in a world where you're just feeling good. It's like that hyped up process. You get on this crazy cool 3D ride, and it's not over there yet. You leave the ride and then you walk right back out into this great Avatar world of merchandise and sales, and you exit and you're in this whole other universe. Like, that's kind of what we do with CXO Worx is we're going to take you through the entire journey. How did you hear about it? How did you make your decision when you were waiting to work with us? How did that feel? How was the actual service, the ride, if you will? And then when you
Mm.
exited, were you still excited and went and told somebody else that, wow, Ben, you got to go ride that Avatar ride? That's how you create the 5-star journey. And one interesting thing that's very common, I guess, in our industries now is when we did the Google reviews when I was running that company, we paid $0. Like
Mm.
no employee got any type of reward or anything like that because I felt like that was focusing on the end result. We went
Mm.
all the way back to the very beginning in our language, how we talk to people and their entire interaction to earn that about 12 times during the process.
Yeah. Well, I really like the way that you said, the review is the finish line, right? And so I think I think a lot of the reason why people in general, and this is not just property management, have a hard time asking for things like referrals or asking for, a 5-star review is because there's this lingering question in their own mind, do I deserve it?
Yeah.
Right? Like that's why we're hesitant to ask for those things because maybe it's a little bit of self-deprecation or some a good amount of humility, right? Like, hey, I don't want to ask this person for this thing if they don't feel that way. But actually taking a step back and thinking about the entire life cycle, right? It's almost like a machine. If you do all the steps correctly, you're gonna get that end product. It's really interesting within the context of the property management world, right? Because I think for so long, like when I came into the industry, 2018 sounds like I think about when you did, right? This shift was starting to happen where people were starting to, think bigger than just like I lease properties and collect rent, and right? Like, how
Right.
have you seen this idea of customer experience shift over the last 7, 8 years that you've been in the industry?
It's definitely been a huge shift that I would even say like on the SEO side and the way that your pay-per-click advertising, the way that that
Mm.
rolls and how they interact. I think the consumers more than anything are the biggest change because
Yeah.
now, we talk a lot about social proof. Like people aren't looking for fancy marketing and fancy ads. The influencer world has like exploded in the past
Yeah.
5, 6 years. So what are other people saying about a product, like an unbiased opinion? And I think that's where our buying behavior continues to move across all platforms is if Ben likes it and his 10 friends like it, I think I might like it.
Mm.
Versus this quick ad that I see that says that, hey, we're the best in the country. Is that accurate? We start to
Yeah.
question that versus going and seeing that social proof that somebody else is using that product or service. And one thing you mentioned, and this is if you're working with BrightReach and you're a BDM, this is so valuable. What I'm about to say is most people only think you can ask for a Google review when you've done something well. And
Mm.
I always talked myself, and I talked to other BDMs at RentScale. Is if you're a BDM, you're going to close, but not every 30 to 50%, right? Like that's what your close rate's going to be. And BDMs would say to me like, well, if I don't close it, how do I ask for a Google review? And I would just come back and say, well, ask them what value that you provided. And even though you're not working with me, it would mean a
Mm.
ton, Ben, if you could write a review and say what you've learned that help you make your decision. An empathetic ask actually builds loyalty, even if they're not
Mm.
paying you directly. Because that next review that said, hey, I talked to Ben and his team, ultimately I decided not to go with them because I wanted to go with company X, But Ben was so nice and polite. He followed up every time. The pricing structure just didn't meet what I was looking for, whatever it is.
Yeah.
But they're giving you direct feedback, and now you've got an additional review that you get to take to the next sales conversation.
That's right. Well, I think that that is such an overlooked point, right? And one of the things that I've talked to salespeople I've coached or managed before about it's like, hey, if you lose a deal, first of all, it's not truly lost, right? Like you are trying to build a relationship for the long term, and you never know what maybe they're going to have a negative experience at some point with whatever option they went with, or maybe they could still refer someone else to you even though they decided not to work with you just because they had a good experience. More than anything, I think it's a great opportunity to get feedback, right? If something maybe was out of sync, and hey, I could have explained something better, right? Like I want to know that, because I think a lot of times as salespeople, it's easy to be like, oh well, they made a bad decision. They're gonna regret it. Like they didn't understand. You kind of like throw it on them as if they did something wrong or they shouldn't have done. And the reality is, it's like we can always be getting better, right? And
Oh,
that sales experience is part of the customer journey, right? You're setting expectations there for what's to come if they do sign up with you. So you mentioned, I love that you mentioned the Disney experience, right? I'm curious because I imagine there's still a lot of people out there working in property management businesses that are like, all right, so like, how do I do? I don't have rides, right? Like this isn't like some sexy thing, product service. Like it's property management. So maybe you could speak to some of the things that you've seen companies do, or even what you did at the management company you work with. That's just like an example of what we're talking about here.
yeah. And here's like super valuable, high impact situation that you could do is when in sales, when that BDM is setting the expectations, really transferring what the culture of the company looks like to someone considering working with them. They should be trained not just to get all the information about the property, but they should be getting information truly about that other person on the phone, like what's going on in their
Mm,
life right now.
yeah.
So one of the cool things that we used to do is on that call, we weren't just trying to find out like their motives. We would actually find out where's their next destination point.
Mm,
So typically owners or maybe investors, they say, I live in Dallas, but I have a property in Tampa. Oh, you a Cowboys fan? Are what's going
yeah.
on?
Yeah.
Are you a big festival coming up that you're going to? You
Yeah.
find those micro things, and we would spend up to $25 on that client as part of the sales process to send them something immediately. Like
Mm,
they said they were a Cowboys fan for that example. We would go to Amazon, find something Cowboys,
yep.
plug in their address, have it overnighted.
Yep.
Boom, there's where it came from. And to start with, it sounded completely silly, like ridiculous. Nobody else is doing that. Why would we do that? And I was like, well, because nobody else is doing it and
Yeah.
because it's ridiculous, I guarantee you that they remember it. And the faster we get it to them, the more impact it's going to have because now we're top of mind. We had a great call with Ben
Mm,
yesterday, and then this Dallas Cowboys coffee cup shows up. And, I'm still making my decision, and I can tell that they pay attention to detail. So you've planted these psychological seeds within this
mm,
process and created an experience. But what you're really doing is you're establishing culture. So when
right.
they say, like, this is who they are in the detail, I actually want to be a part of that because I've got an emotional ROI on this, not just looking at a property ROI.
Yeah. I think that's a great example, Reese. And obviously, I had a similar experience working at Second Nature where there was so much emphasis on the customer, right? And we tried to do things all the time that obviously people see a lot of things at they go to NARPM and they see the big party and like the VIP experience, right? Like, but what you're talking about, I think, is what's interesting about it is like this is very one to one, right? And it feels to somebody that hasn't really thought about this, I would imagine it feels like a pretty big shift, right? Like, why are we doing this? Like, as you're working with companies, how do you kind of get the bigger picture across, right? And yes, we're going to take a couple extra steps and we're going to change the way that we do things. How do you approach the change management part of this with folks? Because I'd imagine that there's a lot of people that have that question.
Oh yeah. So I always start off with like our motto and what we want to install with any company is the relentless pursuit of ridiculous delight. And
Mm,
we have to be relentless in that pursuit. Like when we think that we're doing something well, that's not good enough. Like it needs to just be ongoing. What else can we do that nobody else is doing? Like I do not like replicating. Like I want it to be
yeah,
completely unique. And then that ridiculous delight is what can we do that's just so above and beyond that the best thing that could happen is we make somebody cry, a happy cry, I should say, where they're
sure.
just like,
Yeah.
wow, that was an amazing feeling. We've had
Mm,
in property management, it happens all the time. What if mom or dad died and we inherited the
yeah.
house and we got to
Right.
rent it? How do we give that empathy to that person beyond the property, but understanding where they're coming from in that life situation? So when I sit down with companies, I have to clean the slate. Like I know that you've been taught to check boxes. I know that you've been taught to run an efficient business first, and everything else comes second. What we're going to do is actually do the opposite. We're going to design everything that you do to give the customer what they want, whatever it takes. And
Mm,
yeah, some people rock back in their chair and they're like, well, what does that mean? We're going to have to change everything. And I say, it's
yeah.
not changing everything. You're installing a culture that people are going to want to be a part of. So yeah, it feels funny. It doesn't look like, a playbook. You're not going to find this at Barnes and Noble, but the companies that install this mindset are the big brands that some of us know of because of
Yeah.
that culture, but we've never even used it. Zappos, Chewy, Tesla is even one of those. Like they just do things so ridiculous and different that people want to be a part of that cult, aka culture.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great point. And, to me, so much of it does come down to mindset, right? Like, and I'll use the example, we'll kind of go back to the sales process. How often have you or I had a conversation with a prospect, right? Who they just automatically go to the tactical stuff. Well, how
Yep.
much is it going to cost? What's your leasing fee, right? It's like very like, and if you don't have the right mindset, it's easy to just fall into like becoming an order taker and answering those questions. What would you say to a salesperson who struggles with that, right? Like they don't really have control of the conversation with a prospect. It's more just you're there to answer their questions. What's a different way to think about it, I guess, for a salesperson who wants to do a better job of I want to know things about this person so that I can show empathy or I can relate to them. How would somebody go about shifting their mindset in that way?
Yeah, I think it really comes down to the social IQ piece of it, right? Like instead
Mm,
of talking and answering questions, we need to turn the tables and ask more questions, and not tactical questions. It needs to be, hey,
yeah,
tell me a little bit about how you got to this point. Like, what's the story with this house? How did you come about it? Did you mean for it to be a rental? Like, just
yeah,
really asking the personal questions and lowering that resistance barrier. Because I do believe that oftentimes when people come in asking those direct tactical questions right off the bat, they're trying to remove the sales barrier. That's what their goal is
yeah,
to do, is get down to the facts. But if you push back on that a little bit and you're actually trying to make a friend while you're on that call versus making a sale, whether they buy from you or not, that may be the friend that you need. Look at it from that lens. Like, what can I do to hang out with this person I'm talking with
mm,
versus just trying to sell them a product or service and get them integrated into my system and get on to the next call. Kick back in your chair, have some fun, and make a friend while you're on that call. Because then when it comes to the tactical questions, they're not going to hit as hard and they're not going to be as defensive. They're
yeah,
actually going to hear what you have to say and the whys behind it. So don't be afraid of that. When you get on the phone, relax a little bit. It's not about going through those steps as quick as you can so that you can be efficient. But if you spend
yeah,
an extra 5 or 10 minutes learning, a little bit about that person, what their favorite shoe brand is, or their favorite athletic team, or how old their
mm,
kids are, and really leaning into that and finding something you can relate to, you're going to get a better trust level. And trust is going to be the currency of business in the future.
yeah. I think that's spot on, man. The phrase that I like to use is genuine curiosity,
Mhm.
right? If you can have genuine curiosity about the person that you're talking to on a human level, right? I think what you're describing, that's what starts to happen. Not just I've got to hit a number, I've got to close this deal. And that's hard for some people, right? Like especially if you've come from previous experiences where you were trained like in this very tactical way of, hey, that, you need to find out this, what's the address? How long have they owned it? Like, is it occupied? Like, yeah, sure, you need to know that stuff. But I think when you lead with that stuff, and that's the emphasis of the conversation, then you're not really going to get the opportunity to ask some of the other things that we're talking about, right? It's going to be a lot harder. And the other thing too, you sort of mentioned this before, is like, that's what every other salesperson's doing, right? Like that's the way every other salesperson is approaching these conversations. And so in some ways, even just approaching the conversation differently is a way that you can stand out and provide a better experience.
100%. And you just have to focus on what truly is going on the other side of that phone or the Zoom. Is like, do they feel pressured? Is this
Mm,
a group decision? Is it singular? Like, it's finding out those little elements and just leaning into it. Like, hey, even if you don't work with me today, Ben, I just want to give you all the information so that you can go make the right decision for what makes sense for you. And just telling them that, it's a simple statement that removes that resistance and then allow them to open up a little bit more to you.
yeah, that's awesome, man. Well, Reece, tell me a little bit about, the other thing that I can, excuse me, other thing I can imagine other people, you sort of mentioned this, like there's not a book out there on this. It's going to tell you exactly how to do it. So when you're coming in and working with a company that's unique and they have their own culture, their own values, that sort of thing, like what are some of the things that you're looking for as you're getting to know a company to be able to guide them towards making these types of decisions and really thinking about the entire process?
Yeah, and I think it does start on that initial phone call. I really just try to figure out, where they're looking to go. I even have a little questionnaire that I send out that's kind of like a behind the curtain thing where it's like, are you looking to build this to exit? Are you looking to build this to be a market leader? Are you
Yeah.
looking to build this to influence the entire industry? Like, really,
Yeah.
what are you looking to get out of it? But I always start with the why because that's going to tell me where their mindset is currently at. Now, my
Yeah.
job in some situation is to completely change that mindset. There's very few times that I ask potential clients, I'll say, are you a market leader? Or I'll say, who is your market leader? And
Yeah.
they'll very rarely say themselves. So
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, when I ask that question 2 years from now, I want you to be able to say, I'm the market leader. It's because you
Mm.
were bold. It's because you did things that nobody else has told you to do, that we're going to pioneer versus replicate. So it is a very unique conversation, and to be completely transparent, it usually takes 2 to 5 phone calls of outlining truly what a CXO mindset or position would look like, because it is hard to understand because it's not tangible. I get the question, how do you measure it? And I say, well, how excellent are you? That's how we measure it. And excellent
Yeah.
comes from a variety of things, revenue, door count and property management, your reputation, how much money you gave back to your community. Like, it's a lot of different elements that measure truly what excellence is. So when I'm having that conversation, you can actually see the tonality really just change from, okay, I've been so focused on being efficient and doing things like everybody, all the market leaders are doing because they're successful. So if I do
Yeah.
the exact same things, I'll be successful. And what
Yeah.
I'll tell them is your culture, though, is what's going to differentiate. You can do all the same check boxes and processes as everybody else. But when you truly put a brand and people behind it, it's a totally different view. And a really cool example, two examples really, is what your social media presence looks like. Most
Mm.
people that I see, their generic information they put out on social media. We call it filler post. What a CXO post would look like is the two property management team leaders on a Friday arguing over Moe's or Chipotle, right? Like,
Yeah.
people wanting to
Yeah.
see something fun and flavorful. And then the other side of that is community involvement. I am a huge advocate for getting involved in charitable aspects of your community. You want to take from your community, you want them to buy products or services from you, you need to
Yeah.
go show them that you're a part of that too. So those two elements combined will give you one leg up on 99% of the other players in your community.
There's a couple things you said there that I want to emphasize and have you talk a little bit more about. The first is, this idea of process and checklists like that. I think you and we're in all the Facebook groups. We've got a lot of social media connections. We've worked with a lot of management companies. Like so many people, it's like building scalable process. How do I make a process that's repeatable, that's going to work? And I think there's a lot of good in that, right? Like if you're just kind of flying by the seat of your pants, like, paper everything, like sure, yeah, property management is going to be a lot harder for you.
Yep.
But at the same time, like the automation and, the templated emails that we all build and put into our, CRM, right? Like that's repeatable, but it does that portray your culture? Like me getting a canned email from you after our conversation, like does that make me feel like you heard me? Right? Maybe you could talk a little bit about that balance of like, all right, yes, we want to scale. Yes, we want to be organized. These are good things. Nobody's saying they're not good things.
Yep.
But you know, can it be taken too far, right?
Yep.
How would you challenge someone to think about something like that?
So here's the candid response. It is when you're thinking so much about processes and your 10 sentences you were telling me about your processes don't say, well, my customer wanted. That's a red flag right there. The
Yeah.
fastest way to scale is to give your customers what they want. Like
Yeah.
that's the true thing. Like people will buy more of what you have if they truly like it and it makes a difference in their life. So if your customer wants to get doesn't want to go through a phone tree and wants to call and bend to pick up the phone, give it to them. If your customer wants to see a property at 7 o'clock at night on a self-showing lockbox, give it to them. Stop fighting those
Mm.
elements of resistance and just give it to them and design what you do around that. The more often that we try to install these processes to scale, arguably they're holding us back from really what's going to give us the growth levers that we need. If we give really what a customer truly desires and they feel emotionally attached to that, there's more likelihood that they're going to go tell somebody else. There's more
Yeah.
likelihood that they're going to stay with you longer because they feel comfortable. They're not going to want to make that change. There's more likelihood if you have a service to upsell in the future, they're more likely to trust you and buy that. So instead of optimizing everything you do around a process, optimize for what your customer truly wants to make them feel delighted and then build something behind that that's easy.
Yeah.
The other argument I would make is if you're designing everything for a customer, you're going to attract the right customers and your problems are going to decrease. Most of the
Mm.
time in property management, the reason you have problems and you're building all these processes is because you don't have the ideal clients that you're truly wanting to work with and you're optimized for. So it's
Mm.
very, very important that your culture is aligned. And to give you kind of an example of how sometimes culture outweighs process, there was 7 o'clock at night. I had signed up a new owner here in Tampa. She called the maintenance line, going crazy trying to get in touch with somebody and could not get in touch. A squatter had broke into her home when it was vacant on the market. So this
Oh,
is a critical moment for us, right? So culture kicks in. There's no process. So I saw it come through an email where she was trying to contact somebody at 7 o'clock at night. Saw it, got on the phone with her immediately. I said, look, I can't do anything, but I'm going to come over there and figure out what we need to do next. I
mm.
drove 45 minutes, 7 o'clock at night, got up from dinner, went over there to make sure that didn't do anything, didn't have a tool on me, had
Sure.
nothing. I was just there for comfort and to show her that the company that we were was behind her. That particular owner was so happy with what we did. Not only did she have one property, she moved out to 3 properties, and we managed all of those for years to come from
Yeah.
one experience that cost us nothing.
That's right. Well, and I think we're so trained to think about efficiency, right? Like, and the reality is like you doing that, you drive that was not efficient in any way, but it won a long term customer, right?
Yep.
I mean that I think that's what we're talking about here is like sometimes you do have to think differently, right? Just what is convenient for you personally, what's convenient for your company, right? Is not always aligned to what's most convenient for your customer. And
Yep.
so I think that that's like a big part of what this process conversation comes down to is like we can be very focused on how we as a company get more efficient, but if that's not in service of our end user, then you know it's useless. So you brought up another thing there that's really interesting about ideal client, and this is something that I talk a lot about with folks that I'm working with, especially in this industry, around like, okay, well, we manage rental properties, right? So anybody that's got a rental property, if as long as they're within this big circle, right, we're good. They're an ideal client.
Yep.
how do you challenge people to think differently about that? Because I just think there are a lot of people that they either haven't thought about that question or they're scared that if they narrow their ideal client profile, they're going to be missing out on something.
Yeah, it's definitely scary. And, coming from Ben and I, we're both entrepreneurs. We would love to have all the income in the world, but that's just
Right.
that's not feasible. We have to work with people that align with what we're trying to do together. So if you're really taking a step back and looking, you need to design your business around customer behavior. Not
Mm,
necessarily, a 3-2 in this area, like those little things. It's what's our customer behavior. And a quick example of that is I've always talked about, you could have a brand new construction home lead that comes in, like literally got the CO last week, they're ready to go. And you've got another house that's right down the road that just went through a fire and it has the kitchen's burn up, has a hole in the roof. You walk into new construction house and you're, talking to the owner, what could go wrong, and you tell them like, what if the refrigerator goes out? So that's one of our most common work orders. Even though I know it's new, it can happen.
yeah,
How are you going to respond to a work order, and how fast can we get that refrigerator? And they go, whoa, I bought this new construction. I can't even afford to make my mortgage payment next month unless I get it rented out. Then
right.
you walk into the house with a hole in the roof, and that guy goes, "Hey, look, I know it's got a hole in the roof. I know you guys are highly have a high reputation in our community, and you're going to do me right. Just let me know what it costs. I've got basically $100,000 budget to do this, which should give us plenty of
Mm,
room. Is that something you can make happen? And look, I'm not in any rush. I want it to be done right."
mm,
That is behavior traits. So we
yeah.
need to, as we're looking at our ideal customer, what does that look like? Not the property style, but
Yeah.
what behaviors do we look for as we're broadcasting in the awareness and consideration phases to say, hey, this is who we are. And if we get on a phone call and somebody makes those key statements of, I can't make my mortgage payment, you need to be okay with saying, hey, that actually might cause me more problems than it's going to make revenue. So,
Yep.
should we be taking this on? Probably not, because it's not our ideal customer. Our ideal customer needs to be somebody that fits in this box of, hey, I'm a tenant advocate. I want to provide a safe,
Mm.
nice property for a tenant, and whatever they need, I want to make sure that they're taken care of.
Yeah. Well, and I think back to what we talked about before with the discovery process. You're not going to get to that stuff if you're not genuinely curious about who they are as a person, where they're looking to go. If all you're doing is asking tactical questions about the property, hey, what are you hoping to get in rent? Like, is the property rent ready? You need to know that stuff. I'm not saying don't find that stuff out, but what you just described, you're not going to get any of that if you don't ask a question like that about the refrigerator. Like, hey, let's talk about the maintenance process. What's your customer mindset around these things? Because what I think is happening, like what you just described, most people, if we had stopped right after you talked about the fire and the new construction house, most people would say, "New construction, give me that one. That's the one I want. That's the one I want." But the other thing too about the house with the fire is, man, if you deliver an excellent outcome for that person, what a raving fan you're going to have, right? Hey, this is the journey you took them on. This is where I was, and this is where Reece got me to. I mean, it's a profound difference, right?
Yep. Versus the person that just bought a new construction home and you put it on your syndication site. You had a few people look at it and they lease it in 21 days. It's not fun. It's not exciting. It's engaging. Anybody can do that. But somebody that took in a house with a hole in the roof and had that thing flipped and turned around in 60 or 90 days and brought in a great quality tenant, imagine the confidence that instills in that buyer, that
Mm,
client, and everybody else that reads that story. To your point, it's part of CXO is you got to be an incredible storyteller that comes along with it. And these
yeah,
are the elements that make a huge difference. Back to your point of ideal client, you need to be able to tell stories as almost like a filter that says, hey, if this story happened to you, and read the response. And that's the
right,
social IQ.
right. Spot on, man. Nailed it. The other thing that you mentioned earlier was around social media and building brand in that way. And similar to you and a lot of people that are listening to this, right, have observed, right, these kind of filler posts, right? That a lot of companies do. Hey, I want to have a social media presence, so I'm going to go to this AI tool and have it crank out for me a bunch of posts that are pretty generic. Hey, happy 4th of July from ABC Property Management. And think that that's like enough, right? Like think about like, okay, me building a social media presence means I just need to post. It doesn't actually matter what it is. I think the reality is in the AI world that we're living in, that stuff becomes more common, but also to me very easy to spot, and actually has a detrimental effect on how I think about or view a company. So as it relates to like authenticity and that sort of thing, how would you encourage someone to approach that or think about the way that they're doing that stuff in a way that's actually going to stand out, right?
So the way I look at it is social media is a mirror of your culture. That's exactly what you should be using that platform for.
Mm,
It should not be an information driver and clickbait. The worst one I've seen was this past week. Somebody said it was on LinkedIn, which was crazy too because it was about they have an online tenant portal that you can access 24/7. And I was like, okay, so does 99.9% of professional property managers. And you also
mm,
put that on LinkedIn, which is more of a referral platform than really targeting tenants, if anything.
yeah.
So I was like,
Right.
it's a very bizarre post. So the flip side, and where our belief is in CXO Worx, if you look at it from a mirror, you're showing people what your culture is all about. You're making yourself vulnerable, and then also following fun trends. So you mentioned 4th of July. There was this huge reel that went around with Terry in a wheelchair and the fireworks that went around like a year or
Yeah.
two ago. Like
Yep.
that would be an engaging post where you recreate that, and say, "Hey, here at ABC Property Management, we always bring the fireworks and boom, boom, boom." That's all the stage set. Versus, "Hey, we hope you have a happy 4th of July." So it's taking the minimum standard and then going above and beyond what the expectations of the viewer is going to look
Mm,
like. So it is that mindset where we say, "Hey, we got it, you posted, but what's the next level thing that you can do that's absolutely ridiculous to cause delight?" And people feel a part of that. And then when they see that and they see your culture and they call in and they speak to Ben after they've seen him on like 4 or 5 reels, they're like, "Oh my gosh, Ben, I've been watching your social media. I get to
yeah.
talk to you. This is freaking amazing."
Yeah.
Versus, "Hey, I saw the post you put up about the top 10 mistakes that landlords make, and I'd like to talk to you about that." Right? Like it's
Yeah.
not there's no flavor. And I think people honestly are scared to step outside of that box because it is a new way of marketing, so to say. It's not the standard and norm that we've been taught to do for decades.
No.
So live a little bit, play a little bit. What's the most negative thing that could happen if you're doing something fun and flavorful? You don't get likes. Move on,
Right.
try it again.
Right. Well, yeah, I mean that's definitely something just for me personally building BrightReach that I've really kind of had to wrestle with in my own mind of like, all right, I don't want what I'm posting to come across too much as self promotion or like I want to offer value. I think that's another helpful way to think about it is like, is what I'm posting actually, is it going to make an impact on someone? Like, I really like to post about some of the sales experiences I've had in the past at different stops and or salespeople that I've been managing because I think right it becomes relatable to the person that's reading it, right.
Yes.
um, well, a good example is like, man, we've both been in sales for a long time. Like you hit slumps, right? You hit a rough patch, and so I try to talk about those because it's like, yeah, I know it's hard, and it's going to happen to everyone at some point. And so, if I can offer a perspective or even just some encouragement around that, like that's going to resonate with someone rather than making people think I've got it figured out all the time, right?
So the other thing, and for us and BDMs that are watching this, one of the most powerful social media, I shouldn't be saying this without getting paid for this, but we're going to roll with it. Uh, Cross market yourself. Go
Mm,
find another influencer or another company and use their audience to help promote what you're doing. So,
mm,
where did I learn this? Was I'm huge into the Jeep community, Colony 13 Jeep on Instagram, 16,000 plus followers, highly engaged. So what I realized is I get the most engaging post when I'm partnered with another product manufacturer when I post that
yeah.
out. So I was like, why are we not doing that in business? So if I'm a BDM, Go find a real estate agent. Go find a mortgage company. Go find, a local councilman or your mayor. Like shoot for the
Yeah.
stars and do some cross promoting content with those people, and your audience will explode versus you trying to
Right.
build something on your own. It also gives you a little bit more validity in your market when they see that you're not just solo, that you're partnering with
Yeah.
other brands and other people. So if I would say anything to your audience, man, is like that is a huge takeaway is social media should be fun. It should be the mirror of your culture, but it should also have some engagement from people outside of your company that you're using their platform as well.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point too, and potentially opens you up to their audience, right? Even if it's
Correct.
just it's hey, it's you're mentioning them in a post, or you know, maybe just giving them a shout out for something that they did, right? Like that. That's the sort of things we need to be thinking about. Less so the, how many likes is this going to get, or that you got to
Yep.
get out of your own head a little bit as it relates to this stuff. So
Yeah. What is Seneca? The Seneca quote: "We suffer more in our imagination than in reality." So it's like one of those things.
yeah,
Like, just go do it. Try something new. Watch your
yeah,
your analytics on it and see what people are actually liking to see. And again, it kind of goes back to what does the customer want? Do they want to
mm,
see Ben and Reese arguing over Chipotle and Moe's, or do they want to see Ben and Reese, talk about how to fix a refrigerator? Like, right? Like, what do
yeah.
they really want to hear?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I've got another question for you. We haven't really touched on this a ton yet, but I know it's part of what you're doing, and that is the experience that your own employees have working in your business, right? We talked a lot about the customer, but I think one of the things that's definitely true in this industry, right, is like there's a lot of turnover at property management companies. Folks that it's a hard job. You kind of get beat up a lot. Like, how would you encourage somebody who owns a property management company to think about the experience that they're creating for their own employees?
Yeah, and I think it starts with the top down. One of the things I say often is the best owners act like employees and the best employees act like owners, but it doesn't
Mm,
happen by accident. So if you're an owner or leader of a company, number one, integrate with your employees. Sit down with them. This is one of the exercises that I do with clients is I sit down with their employees and I'm like, hey, what's going good? What's going bad? Like no
yeah,
hard feelings, no emotion here. What do you like? What do you dislike?
right.
And the second layer of that is most people think you can only compensate someone with money, monetary value things. The power of recognition in public to their other peers and team members
Mm,
is almost greater than an actual monetary compensation. So we talk about encouragement between team members a lot. Like when somebody does something good, better be a party inside of that building. Like shout out, there's an email chain going. Like Susie did this, this
yeah,
felt amazing. Like going above and beyond. One of the things that we did with our employees, because we wanted to, again, be involved in the local community, is we had the Strawberry Festival, we had the Florida State Fair that would come into town. So what do? We bought our entire staff and their family tickets to those events because
yeah,
it's relatively inexpensive. You don't have to give a direct bonus. And it also showed that you're about their family too, that you're not
yeah.
just taking care of them and giving a paycheck. And then do random acts of kindness for them
Mm,
was in retail running Sam's Clubs, if I had the closing shift at night, so I would come in from 1 to 10, typically my day staff would work like some to like 5, the management team. I got in at 1 o'clock. I sent every manager home. I'm like, I'm closing. Y'all go home early. I'll figure out my lunch later. But it was
yeah,
just to show that like I'm going to step in your shoes times 10. So when you're
yeah,
talking about property management, maybe step in and help them do their job a little bit from time to time. Showing
yeah,
needs to be done and everybody's tight on schedule. Jump in there, go do it for them. Servant leadership goes so far than the manager that sits in their office or sits behind their email or their keyboard and doesn't do what your soldiers are doing. The best way to hide the general is to put them among the soldiers. So do
mm,
that. It'll install the culture that you need to have so that your employees stay. Eventually, this is how you know you're really doing well is you never have to post a job position open ever again. Maybe you
yeah.
have an opening, but your employees are actively recruiting for you and you never
Mm.
post it online.
Gosh. Well, and what you just said, I just want to point this out to people. Like, this is we're talking about a major mindset shift because I think for a lot of property management business owners, they started the business, they were a solopreneur, and they were drowning in stuff. And so the mindset was, I've got to get to a point where I can hire people to take work off my plate. right? And that's a good thing, right? Like we're doing this for entrepreneurial freedom too. Like that there's a lot of good, but you can put yourself in a position where you've completely removed yourself from the day to day and the experience that your employees are having. And you really have to be proactive about understanding how the team is feeling and what their experience is. If you removed yourself so much from that, you're not going to have a good pulse on things. And guess what? You're going to find out unhappy employees. You're going to find out when they're leaving, right?
Yep.
You're not going to find out, hey, maybe if I had had a conversation 6 months ago, we wouldn't be in this position. That sort
Yep.
of thing. So,
A couple of small things that I look at, behavioral traits, is what percentage of your employees show up early, what percent of them show up on time, and what percentage of those show up late. Because typically, what I've found, the best cultures, people are showing up early. And
mm,
it's very, very telling because people are excited to be there. They're not
yeah.
just getting there when it's time to clock in. They come in, they're hanging out with their team members, they're talking. Did you see the football game yesterday? Like you can feel it. A lot of
Mm,
people are looking for those tight measurables, but sometimes it's just open your eyeballs through a different lens and saying, what are my employees' day-to-day behavior? Are they coming in and hanging out? Are they having breakfast together? Are they, getting lunch? Is one person going to get everybody lunch? It's all those micro behaviors, and if you observe them in the right way, you'll know where you need to tweak and do things a little bit better to install that type of culture. And sometimes it comes down to you've got people on your team that are never going to be a part of that culture. We should never tolerate that either. Like that's
yeah.
another thing. If you're wanting that five-star experience, toleration is not allowed. It's only innovation.
Yeah, well, and a great point there too is that you know sometimes having people on the team that aren't on board with what we're talking about, that's going to create a negative experience as well, right? Like as you talk about culture, like you can't have people that aren't on board with the vision, that aren't rowing in the same direction, because ultimately, you know, it's going to negatively impact everyone. So,
And you and I both can probably, I'll ask you the question on this, is like we've seen sales and ops,
mm,
sometimes companies it's like sales is doing great, but then they feel like ops
yeah,
isn't holding their end of the bargain, or operations feels like they're tight, but Ben's bringing on the wrong properties.
yeah,
So it's an
yeah.
immediate kind of red flag, and I'm sure you've experienced that. Like how do you blend those two? And it comes back to, do we have the right people in the right seat, and am I giving everybody the right culture that they deserve?
Yeah. Well, yeah, and so much of it does come down to leadership, right? I mean, I think one of the challenges of salespeople in this industry is like you tend to be the only one within your organization, right? The majority of companies, if they have a BDM, they just have one. Of course, there are some that have bigger teams, but for the most part, you're a team of one, and that can feel pretty lonely. And so, if you're busting your butt, you're bringing on doors, and you're getting all this resistance from ops over every single, hey, what we need to know this. You didn't give us this. This isn't, this owner's being difficult. This property has a hole in the right. Like, what's going to happen to that salesperson is they're going to get really frustrated, and they're not going to want to be a part of that anymore. And so, really, that's not in my opinion. Of course, the salesperson can do things better, but it's not the job of your salesperson to fix that situation. It's the job of the leader to step in and align both sides, get both groups on the same page. Otherwise, it's you're quickly headed for disaster.
And then you remove the business part of it, and you say, well, what does our customer want, right? Like our customer wants us to be the right expectation set with our BDM. They
Yeah,
want a smooth handoff that's not just paperwork, but we're changing the relationship from a BDM to operations, and they want it smooth, seamless communication. How do we, as a unit, not as a sales or an ops, but as a
right.
unit here, give the customer what they want? Because clearly our design and the customer journey has some flaws if we're bumping heads.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right, and it's a great way to think about that question, right? This is not two sides battling against each other. How do we get everyone doing and thinking the same way about this stuff? So, Reese, I want to ask you one more question before I let you go. So, you've been in the industry for a while. We've talked about some of the changes that we've seen come about. I'm curious as it relates to this customer experience journey. What do you see as like what's the next 5 years of property management look like? How do you see the industry shifting, and where do you think it's ultimately headed?
I'd say the next 5 years, as far from a marketing and sales standpoint, is definitely going to come down to more reputation than marketing and ad spend. I think people are
Mm,
wanting to see celebrities. I think people are wanting to see more of the community involvement to who they're giving their money to.
mm,
I think that the customer base is going to want more out of property management. And when customers in property management is your tenant and the owner of the property, right? We have a two customer system. I think that residents are going to want more and more. They're going to want more amenities. They're going to want more value. They're going to want more cost savings in the short run that may cost them money in the long run. And a
mm.
quick example of that is, the $0 security deposit. I think is ingenious. People move into a property, they don't want to pay a bunch of money out of pocket. They rather
Yeah,
pay more in rent than the first month. Like, okay, if that's what they want, let's give it to them. I
right.
think that there's going to be more opportunity in the next 5 years for property management local partners. That when a tenant moves in, instead of them waiting on the Valpak to get all their coupons, that it comes directly from the property management and they become the local influencer hub. Because if I'm
Mm,
moving to a new city, I'm trusting you with the roof over my head. I should be able to trust you with where to go and what to do in the Tampa Bay area as well.
yeah.
Think the customers are just going to continue to elevating what they need and want. There's going to be more integrations with technology, which is going to give us more opportunity to build relationships. I know a lot of people are scared of the AI boom and it's going to take jobs. I think it does nothing but enhance a true trustworthy business, because if tech can do more of the things that we're typing out and it gives us more time to connect with our customers, that is nothing but a win. But overall, I think the property management business is on a shift, but it's going to be great and positive. There's going to be a ton of properties out there. We've moved into this environment where owning the American home is becoming less and less the dream, and
Yeah.
it's going to be renting the American dream.
Yeah.
So, property managers that are listening to this, give everybody that dream. Make it a nice property. Give them great experiences so that they stay and they don't have to go moving and shopping around, because those are going to be your most valuable clients and they're going to leave you a review, the finish line, so that you can get your next customer.
Mm. I think that's great, man. And it's a great reminder too that as these things are happening and as expectations are shifting, right? It's kind of one of those like you either step up or go ahead and step aside, because somebody else is going to be asking these questions, thinking about these things, rising to meet the new expectations and the new demands of the job, right? You don't want to be the person that's sitting there 5 years from now wondering why your churn is 20%. You haven't grown in 5 years and asking why is that happening, right?
Yep,
It's need to be thinking about it now. So, Reece, this
100%.
is this has been awesome, man. And I know we've talked a lot about property management and property management business owners, but this conversation has really encouraged me to think about the way that I'm doing things too, and the clients that I'm working with. Am I providing an excellent experience? Am I putting them in a position where not only can they reach their goals, but also feel really good about the fact that we work together, and obviously want to tell others about it. So really grateful for this conversation, man. Thanks for making the time. And Reece, if folks are looking to learn more about what you do, where can they find out more, or consume some of the content you're putting out?
Yeah, so two ways. You can go to CXOWorx.com or you can email me at don'tsuck@cxoworx.com. Everybody loves it. I wore my shirt yesterday. It is definitely a little fun catchphrase. But yeah, if you ever want to have a talk or want us to look inside your customer journey, a couple of ways to contact me. I'm not sure I have a job yet because this is all just fun and passion. So if you want to have those conversations, I'm more than happy to.
I love it, man. Well, thanks for being a part of this. And another shout out to look up Reece on LinkedIn as well. He's putting out a lot of good stuff, and I know I've enjoyed consuming it, and it's challenged me to think differently. So thanks again, buddy. This is great.
I appreciate your time, Ben. Thanks for having me on.